Welcome to Retailistic, the official podcast of Coresight Research for March 24th, 2026. This week, our CEO, Deborah Weinswig, welcomes Barry McGeough, Vice President of Innovation and Strategy for all Americo Group house brands for retailers including Walmart, JCPenney, and Kohl's. But before Deborah and Barry tell us what innovation leaders are thinking about these days, here's a quick update on some of the research publishing this week on Coresight.com. The team is at Shop Talk Spring in Vegas and will be publishing daily summaries of the most important revelations from the conference. We also have a fascinating report on the latest AI tools and applications for retail productivity. Also, look for our free report on the impact of digitizing the store. Visit Coresight.com to check out the full catalog. Now, here's Deborah and Barry.
Barry, thank you so much for joining us today for Retailistic. We know you have had a very busy calendar between South by and AFA, Executive Summit, and all of your other adventures. Maybe if you can help us level set where we are right now in a creative destruction kind of way, and where do you think we're going, and how has the speed changed?
That's the million-dollar question right now. Like you said, I just got back from AAFA, and then we did the South by Southwest show. South by is, I call it Davos for the rest of us. So it's where people come together, and they actually renamed it the Innovation Festival. So it's where people come together. It used to be the creator community, but now people are coming together from science, technology, commerce. A lot of people from our industry showed up. It was very, very interesting. Liz Basilar, who is the head of innovation at Under Armour, was there. Kevin Plank was there. So what is interesting is I wrote about this recently, last few days ago, that our industry is actually showing up as well. Why would we go to South by? It's just for movies and music and parties. It's really, really different. And you kind of mentioned creative destruction. Amy Webb had a fantastic conversation with everybody around how that she's forecasting the death of the trend. There are no trends anymore. There is nothing individual anymore. Everything's converged.
I feel that, it's interesting. So you feel like your problems, and I mean around AI, are just yours, but they're not.
Yes.
And so, we just had our monthly AI council call. I'm talking pretty openly, and we're continuing to, all close door policy. And what you realize is it doesn't matter your size. That's also what's interesting. If you're 50 people or if you're 5,000 or 50,000, you all have the same problems right now, and you're all trying to solve for the same things. And I don't think that has happened in my lifetime before. And that, when I'm talking to a CTO, once again, a 50,000 person company, and we've got the same problems or the same opportunities to fix things, that's exciting, right? Because I agree on the death of the trend, because I actually think things are changing so quickly. But then also so much is democratized. And it's I was saying something like my brain actually hurts, because you're trying to think about, what does it mean for you personally? What does it mean for you professionally? And what does it mean for your clients, right? Those are three different ways to think about the change. So, Barry, I think you, more than most of us, do a great job of synthesizing and thinking about personally, professionally, right? Customers. What's your process?
So my particular process, I really believe if I'm going to really do applied innovation properly, the idea that innovation is not just an idea, it's not an art project. If it's really going to improve my business in a demonstrable way, it's either going to improve my process, efficiency, go-to-market, and revenue and profit, right? How will it affect my margin? Then I have to really think about what's happening not only in my business, but what's happening in adjacent industries. So what I really like to do is look at things which are next door to me, because what you said is really true. We think of the problems that we're going, and we're going to go it alone. If we're retailers, if we're brands, we think that we have to reinvent the wheel. But what's happening in defense? What's happening in biotech? They're solving for the same things. One of the most interesting companies that I've seen that's doing AI for demand planning is Palantir.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? We think of them as defense, and yet their ontology blew my mind. That's non-obvious. So my process is to look at what's happening around my industry. So I start at the beginning of the year with what I call the predictive quarter, where CES and NRF, we do it together, Deborah, and I call it sort of hardware, software, 1-2 punch. right? And then we get into like, okay, what are they talking about at World Economic Forum? So that's interesting, right? What is the direction of humanity, society, technology, and governance and government? Where's the money
This
going?
is
How do we skate where the puck is going? And then there's several things that I try to bring in and ingest. AAFA and DC is one of them. So they're talking about our industry specifically, policy, supply chain. Obviously, supply chain got real interesting 2 weeks ago, right? And now, and then the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae, the banana split, is where everyone comes together and they say, okay, also, there is the real Davos, right? And then what are we talking about where we can access these ideas? How can I find these adjacencies to find solutions to the problem so I don't have to reinvent the wheel?
I mean, there's a speed component. There is a looking at what's worked and not worked for others. It's interesting on Palantir. I can remember a distinct conversation last year at the NACDS Executive Summit, and I was walking with somebody, and we were being brought in on an advisory project, and Palantir was going to be a part of that. And it was just kind of like one of those things. And it was a lot of it was supply chain oriented. And it's like there's those like moments of like demarcation almost where you just start to think differently. And that was it for me, where I'm like, rules of the game are changing. And this kind of like looking across the bow, like we do a lot of work in healthcare, but we've always looked at healthcare for inspiration. And, I mean, hospitals, right, like more and more, they look at, right, like when you go and you check into a hospital or doctor's office, right, like that's like retail. And what we're
Mm,
seeing, Barry, and I don't know, I would love to push your boundaries on this, like, right, bank branches, retail. And so maybe it goes to, right, like these customer facing businesses. But when they're reaching out to us, they're like, we look at this as like a retail experience. Like you want to have somebody leave with like a positive feeling about their experience, right? They want good customer service or even like they expect better. So I feel like retail for really one of the first times in my career is being kind of elevated in a way that others are looking to our industry for inspiration and innovation.
absolutely. I mean, that was a big subject at CES. So people are talking about how will we start to use these technologies to improve the retail experience. And I don't think we're fully formed. I think the need state is there, but we have to find out what people will accept and what people will embrace in the experiential versus what they can do, because you can experience so much now in mobile and on desktop. And the reason I say that is because there is so much compelling content out there right now. And with the explosion, Deborah, I spend a lot of time thinking about what we're doing with visual, right? What we're doing with imagery, what we're doing with synthetics. We did a really, really interesting pilot at Magic last year where we actually used a text to render to 3D to video to do a billboard with full synthetics in front of the Magic show. And these people didn't exist. So I refer to this as what we refer to as the uncanny valley, to go from something which you don't believe, like remember the metaverse?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the metaverse, you could get a little Lego Roblox figure, and you could look really goofy, right?
Yeah.
But
That,
now
that was the problem.
but now you believe it. So when you cross the uncanny valley, you believe. And so what we're seeing right now, continue to see the rise of synthetics that will be replacing models, enhancing models, and that people get real scared, right, about jobs. But then also we're going to improve efficiency. So you can take those synthetic models and you can put them on your PDP pages. You can put them on TikTok. They can be influencers. There's something going through New York right now, New York State, which it will pass very quickly. It will be signed by the governor when it hits her desk. That if you're using synthetic models, you have to have a disclaimer that says this is an AI person, because it's so good, Deborah.
Oh,
Because it's so good.
I will tell you, this is where going back to like your brain hurting.
Uh-huh.
There are times now where I'm like, I don't know if this person is real or not.
Yes.
And if you think about it, right, go back like 2 years and right, I mean, I remember reading, right, I mean, we write research for a living. With commas out of place, with misspell. I mean, like I can't like that's if you want me to like break out in hives, that's the best way to do it. And all of a sudden, right, and like New York Times would have like mistakes all over the place, right, like everything you read, and then all of a sudden, right, it was gone because everyone was using AI either like for editorial or more. And so you think about it now, like when I see somebody with a spelling mistake, like my brain is like, did they do that on purpose? So we think that
Oh,
it's authentic.
people are doing that. That's a really good point. I've heard that.
Yeah. And so it goes back to, I'm like, let's be honest, if I see somebody pick their nose on a video, I'm going to assume that the person's real. but maybe they're not.
Did you see today? It was actually yesterday. It was posted on X because there is some rumor going around that Netanyahu is not alive anymore, and so there was a video of him getting a cup of coffee, and it was posted on X as sort of proof of life. But because of the frames per second, it was kind of a low FPS, and people said, "See, that's a fake video." So here's a question: is it fake or real? Is he alive or not? Like, we're gonna have to ask these questions now.
So there was something
It's really interesting.
when our AI council formed in 23. I still remember one of the first meetings, and we had we always have a lawyer on just because we've got competitors in the room. And this lawyer said something that has stuck with me around. So let's say you let an employee go or they leave, right? They're no longer there, but their essence is there. Their emails are there.
Mm.
You could then take all those emails and create, let's say, Natalie, right? So let's say Natalie was there, but Natalie's no longer there. And now you have synthetic Natalie. So what are the implications of that? Because that's the real person Natalie's, right? Like that is her essence. Did she give you approval for like these are some of the things, and that was conversation 3 years ago. And so I feel like we haven't even figured that out, but it goes back to like what you just said about Netanyahu, right? Like this idea is Natalie still working there? Is she not? If her LinkedIn is maybe like not updated, that like these are the things like what does that mean if we've got kind of like the essence and then can that person or that synthetic and I have to be honest, this is where like you're like if it's a person's and I mean, hey, I don't know about you, but like I've created agents and like I will talk to them. And like when I have real like when there's things I can't solve because I'm like, I don't want to like burden people. And I'll talk to them and I've named them. And then I'm just like, where are we in this kind of like problem solving journey? And how do we think about, right, like these agents? Because in some cases, right, you're talking to people and they're talking about them like they're people. So I don't know how you, like when you're problem solving or when you're working and you're creating something, how do you relate to what you've built?
So as you're saying that, it's fascinating. I mean, one of the things that PwC actually recommended about a year ago for it, and the opposite of that, Deborah, is that they advised companies to put into their contracts with their employees the fact that they can own their name, image, likeness.
Serious.
They can, that was a way to protect the enterprise. There is recently legislation in California just passed that actually protects name, image, likeness, right? So we're going through this sort of raging debate about who owns who, right? Do you own yourself? It's very should an organization be protected so that they have the right to create Natalie? Isn't that interesting, right? Because maybe that is in the company's interest. Is creating Natalie would be a good thing. Business continuity, don't have to pay for Natalie, like all those kinds of things.
Interesting. So I will say I find that our president who does a lot of our contracts, he like can't necessarily put it into words, but he's absolutely spending exponentially more time on contract reviews. And if you think about it, right, we're a research company with our own proprietary data and research. And so we can't have people's models training on our content. So we've had to put that and we've had to redo a bunch of contracts, right? And it goes back to this idea around like, what's IP?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question now.
So with what you do, and I actually think that when it comes to imagery, that's where we're seeing things change the fastest.
Yeah. Right.
And I'll tell you, this is what keeps me up at night, right? Because we work with a lot of retailers and increasingly the focus is on in-store, right? On-shelf availability, et cetera. So because of imagery drives demand, how far in advance are you planning things? And then how do you make sure that you have like inventory against that?
Ideally, Deborah, we're going to start to, these tools are going to compress our go-to-market timelines. So we're looking at ways that we can use Gen AI to go to not just the design cycle, but to compress the selling cycle as well. So everything that goes into it. So that is going to have some knock-on effects for longer lead time supply chains that we have. I mean, in our industry, we have a diabolically long go-to-market. So we're going to have to learn how to be a lot more market reactive. There are going to be some things that are going to have to happen on the robotic side. And so, you and I were both at CES. One of the things that's happening that I think is really interesting is there were a lot of robots at CES. Went from the last year was the Roomba show, and then it was the robot show, like a lot of exoskeletons, and everyone said, "Is this going to be the year of the robot?" And in actuality, we saw Jason Kokunis from All In made a really, really good point. It's a really great podcast, and he said next year will be the year of the robot, not this year, because the robots can exist, but they can't interact with in time and space. We're building those foundation models, those world models now. We're building them really fast. There's a company in Silicon Valley. My old boss, Ivan Poparev, he's got a company called Archetype AI, and they are mapping the physical world. And Jan LeCun just left Google to build a foundation model. So as these foundation models exist, then we're going to have these visual language action models, VLAMs, that robots can look and have zero incident reactivity in factory environments and manufacturing environments. So why does this matter to us? That's how we speed up the supply chain with robotics, is that they don't bump into each other. They don't kill people accidentally. They don't, if they're grabbing eggs, they don't break the egg, right? This is really, really important stuff, because if we're moving at the speed of customer demand and the speed of consumer expectation, we have to speed our supply chain up, and it has to be with robots. And so we're looking at this rapid acceleration of compressing our supply chain in ways that we probably will not have seen before, because of foundation models and VLAMs and things that we don't really pay attention to when we're making socks and t-shirts. So you asked me my process earlier before. That's my process, to try to understand what we need to be prepared for as we watch our factories modernize, as we have these rapidly changing consumer expectations. Yes, I've crossed the uncanny valley. Yes, I believe. Yes, I want. Yes, I buy. Buy now. Boom. And then what happens? We fall apart. We're not ready for it.
Even like last mile. So
Yeah.
so in 2016, we did a big project to try and reshore.
Mm-hmm.
And we went down south where they were giving all kinds of tax breaks and credits and whatnot. And, we're looking at putting down like 1 million square feet and et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, because so much of the capital equipment isn't here, the cost, the time, the this, the that, the ROI didn't work. But, and I've actually thought quite a bit about this, but if we start to move into, let's say, robotic processes around manufacturing, and you don't necessarily need all this capital equipment, right? If it's robotic led, what does that do for supply chain? And then what does that do in terms of like compressing this whole timeline?
Are you asking about what is the CapEx involved? Because it's kind of
No. So if let's say if you bring things to the US, right?
Mhm.
Just going back to that's the best way to, if you're delivering to a North American consumer, to compress timeline. We're not talking politics, right? So if we say that the whole cycle, let's say, is going from 36 weeks to 2, which it absolutely could, then the product has to be available here. And so, hey, maybe even do C2M, right? Customer to manufacturer, the customer orders it and it's made. But the cost of like heavy CapEx, right? That doesn't work right now. And even just like getting the capital equipment here. But robots could do, right? They can cut, they can sew, they can, right? Like they can dye. It's much better for them, right? Than, right? Like so much of the toxicity. Like I've actually like thought about this a lot, is why do we need to invest so much in all this heavy capital equipment? Couldn't robots do most of it? I'm not talking like software automation kind of stuff. I'm talking like a new generation of how we think about supply chain.
I think it's going to really depend on the vertical. You're probably going to see this more in agriculture and food than in apparel. There also, I've seen some really interesting examples that I'll be kind of laying out of robotics that are only using the part of the robot that you need. Instead of a full human robot, they're just using the arm. Because there's an argument, and I think it's a really important one, that we are obsessed with humanoid robots. Now, there's a reason for that, because our world is based on the human form. A doorway is the size it is because a human goes through it. Okay? Got it. However, being a humanoid robot is tough. It's bipedal. We're the only people that have really pulled it off. Being bipedal is hard. You fall over a lot, right? So what if you only need the arm? And so it's the R2D2 versus C3PO argument, right? Maybe you just need R2D2. So you see all the little, like the last mile delivery carts, they were all over Austin, the Uber Eats ones. So like the Zooks, again, all over Austin, they're not shaped like a car. They're shaped like a living room. Isn't that interesting, where everybody faces each other? because you don't need to be facing forward because the Zoox takes care of that. So we're going to have some really interesting conversations on form factor. What you need is what you get, right? Winnie wig.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to get real interesting, because those are the ways we're going to be able to mitigate the capex, because we just think in terms of like humanoid robots, and we're going to have to think about what we need to be able to make that expenditure worth it. I went to Plug and Play last fall. They had the Plug and Play Silicon Valley thing. There were over 400 people pitching there. Madhouse, really,
Yeah.
really fascinating. There was a company that made robotic arms for space. There's a lot of money in space right now. It's dripping with cash, and a lot of technology is dripping off of space right now, which we need to be aware of. That's a really important adjacency. And they said, we're pitching you guys because we want to sell these little gripper arms to ag.
Yeah. I mean,
Because the problem in ag is labor costs. So they were like, okay, we did it for space, but it's really good for picking strawberries.
I've seen the tomatoes ones, and you're just amazed. But I want to make sure our audience understands how important what you just said. So Cristiano Amon, the CEO of Qualcomm, said at CES dinner I attended this year, how everyone's so excited, right? Like have these kind of like household cleaning robots. And he's like, that's just not realistic, right? He's like, you can have one put the dishes in the dishwasher. You can have one take the dishes out of the dishwasher. You can have one like sweep the floor. You can have one mop the floor. But going back to this idea, and I agree with you, it's not like in humanoid form, but the robot at this point is not able to clean an apartment or clean a home, right? Like you can't, that's just, it can't follow all the processes. It's not built for that. And so I think we're going to have these single purpose robots for a while. And I think for a while, because you almost need AGI in some ways, I think to have truly right, like autonomy. But still, if like people aren't having to lift heavy equipment, right, going back to exoskeletons and stuff like that, right, there's a lot here that could change quite rapidly. And when it comes to supply chain, I think your humanoid example is an important one, right? We've always thought about things in a certain way because we've taken it from like a human mindset. But if we start to infuse robotic, RPUs, right, robotic processing into this, how does that change? And how does that change quickly?
So I feel awful that I have to go to my next thing. And
So
I may have to leave it as a cliffhanger.
We're gonna leave the cliffhanger and we'll have to have you back. But you are awesome as always. Thanks so much and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks, Deborah. And thank you for joining us this week. Coresight Research serves the retail industry with time-sensitive research on consumer shopping behavior, retail technology innovation, and financial performance of leading retailers and brands. We also facilitate leadership communities, conduct seminars and conferences, provide strategic consulting, conduct technology assessments, and develop proprietary data resources. Visit us at Coresight.com to learn about all the ways we can support your success. Have a wonderful week.